Hey there, everyone. Art Burns here. I hope you're all having a great day today. So, yesterday I talked about compassion and how compassion is a fantastic tool to allow us to be present and to allow us to kind of be whole, right? Which is to heal ourselves, but also to a great tool for just simply showing up, right? The reason for this is that there's so many times in our lives where we're triggered by other people, right? As I said, somebody cuts us off on the road, somebody bumps into our cart, somebody jumps in front of us at Starbucks, what have you. There's so many times where other people cause us to feel a sense of emotional something, right? Whatever that is, right? And so compassion, right? Understanding that these people, whoever it is in our lives, whoever we're experiencing, knowing that these people are just like us. They're just trying to be happy. They're trying to achieve their own well-being. They're trying to reduce their level of suffering, and they're doing what they think is going to help them to achieve that, right? And when we can acknowledge that, it makes it much easier to kind of allow ourselves not to feel that triggering, which takes us away from our own well-being, right? Our own ability to show up for our lives, right? Because that's really what it's about, right? It's about showing up for your life the way that you want to show up for your life, right? Like that is the goal. That's what's really truly important, right? Because when we live in our own integrity that way, right? When we are showing up to the people in our lives, to ourselves in our lives, to the responsibilities that we have in our lives, and we are there fully and attending to each moment of our lives, we are giving it everything we have. And when we're giving it everything we have, then we have this sense of like, this is all I can do. And so therefore there's no measure of failure. There's no measure of discontent. There's no measure of negativity, shortcoming, anything like that, right? It's just, when we can show up to our lives the way that we intend to show up to our lives, everything kind of falls into place at that point. And when they don't fall into place, we don't feel that it's our fault, right? We don't feel like it's something, well, I'm just not working hard enough, or I'm just, I'm finding different excuses for what's going on. We simply acknowledge the fact that, well, I just need to adjust something. I need to just, kind of change something about the way that I'm approaching this, and then things will fall into place, right? So it gives us the ability, the optimism, and the confidence to keep going, right? And this is very, very vital in whatever walk of life, but particularly in parenting, right? Like this is a really, really important aspect of ourselves but it's true for everything. But for all you parents out there, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like we have this sense of like, oh, this isn't working. I'm failing. I'm not doing it right. I'm worried about what's going to happen from this, right? So when we can act in compassion and allow compassion and gratitude to kind of come together and relieve us from any of these pressures that we might feel, like seeing someone else do something in a certain way, we release ourselves. Or, as I say, when people do things to us, instead of triggering us, right, including our children triggering us, right, we can allow it to just be like, we can say to ourselves that, well, my child is just doing what he or she feels like she needs to do to make him or herself happy right now, right? And once we can reframe things that way, it becomes much easier to sort of, stay whole and stay present and show up, right? And so there's a really interesting thing that happens with compassion, right? Most of us are willing to express compassion for just about anybody, right? Like if I tell you all that I'm telling you today, like the fact that people are all just trying to do what they feel they need to do in order to make themselves happy, right? Most people can feel like, okay, yeah, I get that, Art. Thanks for telling me that. Now it makes a lot more sense, and now I'm able to kind of, you know, let things go a lot more, right? The person who cuts me off, the person who jumps in front of me on a line, the person who bumps my shopping cart, right? The person who I heard talked about me, these kind of things, right? I'm able now to sort of let those things go, right? But at the same time, most of us have this line, right? There's one spot beyond which we refuse to let ourselves go, right? I can wish compassion and and goodwill for all of these people over here, but this one person, no way. Because this one person did something that really hurt me, right? This one person did something that really hurt others. This one person represents everything that I hate in my life or in the world or what have you. So I will not allow my compassion to get into this person. Now, the problem with that is that in that moment, right, that you are not allowing yourself to wish that one person or that group of people, whatever's beyond that line, when you're not allowing yourself to wish compassion for those folks, what you're doing is you're damaging yourself. So therefore, you are taking away compassion for yourself. Right, and when compassion really kind of, for it to work properly, it's got to be a 360-degree thing, right? We have to feel compassion for ourselves, which often starts with feeling compassion for others, right? But it also has to be all others, right? Because as what I'm explaining to you now is that when we withhold our compassion from certain people out there, what happens then is that we're hurting ourselves, and therefore we are not practicing compassion for ourselves, right? Because if we're practicing compassion for ourselves, we can't be hurting ourselves at the same time, right? Those are, contradictory sort of intentions there, right? So when we can, and now of course, compassion operates on a spectrum, right? Like there's not, it's not just, at a certain point it becomes compassion for everyone, right? Every living thing on the planet, in fact, right? That's why you hear about, Buddhist monks and Zen masters, right? Who won't even, hurt a fly, right? They would literally like stop their car if they saw a fly crossing the road, right? That's because they truly feel the compassion for every single living being, right? But now what I'm trying to get to here, though, is that takes a long time and a lot of practice to get to that point, right? And I'm not here to suggest that you need to get to that point necessarily, right? There's a lot of, I don't want to give you that sort of ideal to shoot for, right? That's not any of my business how you choose to kind of, live your life that way. But what we can do is we can feel compassion. We can start, obviously, we start with the people who are easier to feel compassion towards, and then we go kind of, one of the practices that I use to develop compassion is we start out by wishing compassion for the people who are very easy for us to wish it for, right? The people who we love in our lives, right? And then we move into like the neutral people in our lives, right? The person who works at the coffee shop you go to, the person at the cash register when you're checking out at the supermarket, right? Or people in other cars, right? People who we don't know, but we recognize them as other people. And so wishing those people compassion, right? And then we move into those people who are more difficult, right? Those people who have hurt us before, the people who are kind of, hard for us to wish them well, right? And we all have those people in our lives, right? So it's that person, and of course, again, most of us, like when we start out doing this practice, there are some people in our lives who we can say, it's that grumpy person at the office, or it's the police officer who pulled me over the other day for speeding, or a neighbor down the street who's particularly nosy or something like that, right? Like there's those kind of people in our lives, but then we can start to extend that sector of those people in our lives who we feel that we just can't offer that compassion to, right? And that's what we're talking about today, is how do we get to wishing that compassion for every other person, right? Even the people who we see on the news who are doing really terrible things, right? Because again, the same principle applies. I know it might be hard for you to believe right now, but as you do this practice, and you keep up with the practice, you will realize that the same logic applies to everyone. Even people who do horrible things, right? They are doing horrible things because for whatever reason, not that they're right, not that we agree with them, but for whatever reason, they feel that what they're doing is going to relieve their own suffering. Right? It's the basic concept of being human, right? That's what our emotions are doing, right? Our emotions are propelling us towards our own happiness and away from our own fear. And so that's what we're always doing. No matter who we are, no matter what it is that we're doing, right? Even if it hurts somebody else really, really badly, right? And so as I talked about yesterday, and as I started to talk about a little earlier in this video, when we can consider this as something that we're not wishing the person well for their well-being, but instead we're wishing them well for our well-being so that we can show up to our lives, so that we can have a fulfilling, satisfying, successful life. Right? Like so in other words, the person that hurts you, right? And when you think about that person, you are no longer there for your child, for your job, for your spouse, for your friend, for yourself. You're not there at that moment because you're thinking about this other person, right? And so that's what brings us to a point of forgiveness. Okay, now when I mention forgiveness, most people have a really kind of hard time grasping this, or not grasping, but kind of wrapping their head around the whole term of forgiveness, right? A lot of times people feel that if I forgive someone, that means that I am giving them license to do what they did to me, right? I'm absolving them of their wrongdoing, right? And I'm inviting more of whatever this person has done to hurt me, right? And so this is not really what forgiveness is, right? That is more absolution. That is more condoning. That is more inviting, people to do what they want to do to you, right? But forgiveness is simply the act of allowing yourself to not feel that, allowing yourself to break free from the bond of that ill will that you have towards someone, right? In other words, forgiveness is a way to relieve the suffering that you're feeling as a result of whatever somebody did to you, right? Because what happens is, right, somebody does something to hurt us, right? Or somebody does something to hurt somebody else, right? So there's that initial suffering that happens, right? When we get hurt or we see somebody else get hurt, right? We hurt in that moment, right? Like that is pain, that is suffering, right? But eventually that pain and suffering heals, right? It goes away, right? Like whether it was like, somebody ran into our car, eventually our insurance comes through and pays for the car. If we broke an arm, eventually the cast comes off and we can use our arm again. Now of course, yes, there are some times where there's permanent damage, right? But to the extent that it's possible, healing and repair happens, right? But forgiveness or the lack of forgiveness, what this means is that beyond that repair and that healing, the suffering keeps happening. Because now, not only are we, even though we've repaired and we've healed from whatever has happened through this experience, we're continuing to suffer through the feeling of the anger and the resentment, right? And that's continuing to affect us physically. It's continuing to affect us greatly emotionally. And it's taking away our ability to show up, right? It's taking away our life, right? It's taking away our pleasure, right? So now the idea is not that you need to contact the person who ran into your car and call them up and say, hey, listen, I forgive you. It's okay. That's not what I'm talking about here, right? But what I'm talking about is to let go of that anger. Let go of that emotional thing that is keeping you from moving on with your life, from showing up to your life, showing up for your loved ones, showing up for your children, your job, your spouse, your friends, showing up for you, right? And that's the act of compassion for yourself, right? So forgiveness is self-compassion because it allows you to heal. I did a video about just about a month ago, actually, almost to the day. I think tomorrow will be a month. But I did another video about forgiveness. You can go look at that again if you want. There's a lot of information there. But one of the things I believe I shared was a story about a doctor who worked in the burn unit in New Orleans, right? And this doctor followed, hundreds of his patients over the course of like 5 years. Followed hundreds of patients and found that when he was able to convince people to simply acknowledge the openness to forgive whoever caused them to be burned and to forever, cause them to be hurt, even if that someone was themselves, right? If they were willing to forgive and still, pressing charges, still suing people, still getting damages and making themselves financially whole, right? It wasn't about like, oh, let go of it, don't blame anybody, let them go, no, still punish, still get what you need to get out of this, right? But emotionally forgive them. What he found is that the people who are willing to forgive took skin grafts without rejection at a rate of 1 to 4. Meaning the people who were unwilling to forgive would have 4 different skin grafts done wherever they were burned, compared to 1 on the people who were willing to forgive. And that's because their bodies were rejecting it, right? That's how much the anger and the resentment affects the physiological functioning of your body, right? So again, I say forgiveness and self-compassion and compassion for others, right, is for you. It makes you better. It makes your body function better. It makes your emotions function more in a more balanced way, and it enables you to show up for yourself the way that you want to show up for yourself, right? And this is what's important, because the thing is that most of the time when we're not forgiving someone, right, that person who ran into us in the car, a few months ago, right, that person's living their life, right? They're not checking in with you and saying, oh, are you still angry with me, stranger who I hit that day in my car? Are you still feeling this rage towards me because it's keeping me up at night? No. That person's living their life. They're doing whatever they're doing, right? Maybe they're hitting other people. Maybe they're living a horrible, pained and suffering life, right? Or maybe they're living a very happy life. Whichever it is, it has nothing to do with how you feel about them, right? And so all this time, we tend to hold on to this, right? We tend to hold on to this grudge and thinking that the more I feel this anger towards that person, it's going to somehow give them their comeuppance, right? But it doesn't. It doesn't at all, right? They don't know, they don't feel, they're just doing their life, right? So the idea of compassion, right, to know that when that person hit me in the car, whatever they were doing, even if it was just sheer carelessness, even if it was just absolutely, texting while they're driving, which they should never have been doing, right? They thought that sending that text while they were driving was something they needed to do to make themselves happy. It wasn't something they did to hurt me. I got hurt as a consequence of their actions, but their intention was to make themselves happy and to relieve their own suffering, right? And so once we can truly grasp that concept, and the way that we can do that is to just wish people well, wish people to be able to find the happiness in their lives, right? Once we can do that on a intentionally habitual way, we make it much easier for ourselves to see that, yeah, whatever anybody's doing at any given time, it's in the service of their own well-being. And when we can see that, it becomes much easier to look at forgiving them for our own benefit. Right? It becomes easier to say, okay, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to take this burden of all this anger and hate that I have in my heart for this person because it's damaging me a lot more than it's damaging them, and I'm going to put it down. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to walk away from it because I don't need it. it's not helping me in any kind of way. Now again, this can happen in big ways of, like, horrible car accidents and stuff like that, but it can also happen in little ways, right? Like when you have a meeting at work and someone says something that you got offended by, or on social media, you're seeing something on social media that, oh, how could this person say that thing, right? And these little things that happen, like when you feel that, oh, how could that person say that thing, right? If you don't let that go, if you don't forgive them for what they said and recognize that they're just saying what they said because they thought it would make them happy, even though it's absurd that it would think that, right? Even if you completely disagree with it, right? If you can do that, or if you don't do that, then for a period of time between that, oh, how could they say that, and however long it takes you to get over that, which can be anything from a few minutes to a few days or weeks even, right? But during that time, you cannot be completely present with what's going on in your life, right? So when you're feeling that way, like when you're on your phone at the playground, when your children are playing and you're on the phone and you're like, oh, this person, political views or whatever, how ignorant and, however you feel about whatever they're talking about, and you're just pecking away at it, and then your child comes over and says, hey mom, or hey dad, can I, look at this flower I found? It's like, okay, fine. You're not really there, right? Of course, that's a silly example, and I'm being, comedically, exaggerated here. But the point is, though, that when you're child, you cannot go from here to here and be fully present here if your emotions are like this here. And so that's the benefit of practicing compassion and allowing forgiveness to happen. I hope this makes sense to you. I hope you enjoy this. I hope this rings a bell with you. I hope this resonates in you enough that you'll consider taking up some of these practices, okay? Because you can do this practice 5 minutes a day, something like that, even less, to start with. But the more you do, I'm going to be very honest with you, the more you do the practice, the deeper and more quickly you're going to get the results of it. Okay, that's a cause and effect, right? The more we put into something, the more we get out of it, right? But even taking just a few minutes a day is going to make a profound difference for you and the ability that you have to show up. Showing up for your family, showing up for your loved ones, showing up for yourself, right? And then you can reap the rewards that come from that showing up. So if you'd like to learn more about these practices, I mean, I told you how it goes. You just, just picture these 3 different people in your life. You start with someone who is well, first of all, you start with yourself. And there's like 6 different phrases I can send you that you say those phrases to yourself. Then you picture somebody very easy to wish compassion to, right? Somebody you love very much. You think about them, nothing but positive, emotions come. Say the same phrases to them. Now pick someone neutral. A cashier, another driver, someone in the office you don't really ever talk to, and just wish this for them. And then get to the hard part. Get to the person who is difficult, right? The person who gets up your sleeve a little bit, and wish the same for them. And start with just the person who annoys you a little bit, and then gradually and slowly and gradually get to the point where you're actually taking people who you like really, really don't like, and you're offering the same to them. All right, so check it out, try it out. I'd be really interested to hear what you think about this and how it feels to do it. Because again, it's going to make it much easier to then accept people's actions for what they are, and you feel compassion for them. You feel forgiveness and then compassion for them, and want them to be relieved of the suffering that's causing them to do these things. It's really, really a much easier way, because I can tell you, I've tried both ways. I used to be the guy that was very, very angry, very resentful. Somebody did something to me, I never forgot it. I'd see the person months later and I'd scowl at them, because I was still just never going to forgive them, right? And I can tell you right now that living this way and letting it go, and again, it doesn't mean that when I see them a few months later, I have to be like, oh, great to see you. No, it still might not be great to see you. but I'm neutral about it. I don't hate you. I don't feel that anger inside of me. And this way to live is much, much easier than that way was. So if you'd like to talk more about this, please don't hesitate to give me a shout out here on YouTube or the podcast. You can send me a message. You can go to my website and artburnscoaching.com. Get in touch with me through there, however you want to do it, all right? But get in touch with me if you'd like to talk about this. I would really like to talk to you about it. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening, for watching, and I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care.